Doing art definitely is something very soul-soothing to me. It takes me to a place of disassociation about my traumatic life.
Melissa Snelling is slowly returning to the hobbies she loved as a child, after a decades-long fight for justice resulted in her adoptive father being jailed in 2019 for sexually abusing her as a child.
He was charged with persistent childhood sexual abuse. So what that does to a child's body when it's persistent is incredible, and I've had multiple surgeries.
Melissa's abuser pleaded guilty to maintaining a sexual relationship with a child and was sentenced to 9 years in prison, which he's still serving. But Melissa faces a lifelong recovery.
So my life has seen doctors, seeing psychologists, seeing counsellors, having support workers. Is there a day that I won't suffer? I'm probably not sure about that. It's been a battle, and I'm still battling.
Out of 10 years of doing survivor victim claims, the case of Melissa Snelling was probably the hardest one I've been involved in. That was the most heinous and abhorrent case of child exploitation that I've ever seen.
Andrew Carpenter says it's not uncommon for abusers to dispose of their assets before going to prison in order to avoid paying their victims, which happened in Melissa Snelling's case.
About 8 days before he was sentenced, he managed to give his son his house and try to sell it for $20,000. Now, that was easy to claw back, but when people have superannuation and they try to dispose that before they go to jail, that's something that's almost impossible to claw back.
The push to change that started back in 2017 after the chief executive of dairy giant Bega Cheese was convicted on multiple charges of sexually assaulting children.
Former CEO of Bega Cheese denied suggestions that his highly respected role allowed his offences to go undetected.
When his victims sued, they discovered he'd liquidated millions of dollars worth of assets and had hundreds of thousands in his super fund, which could not be legally accessed. In another high-profile case, Peter Liddy, South Australia's longest-serving magistrate, was jailed for 25 years in 2001 for sexually abusing children. His victims are also fighting for access to damages from his super fund.
There's no way that they can go into the super funds based on the current legislation to try and get damages payable for their abhorrent crimes.
This is a learning process. We're all learning, and we can always be doing better.
Former Australian of the Year Grace Tame is now throwing her support behind the campaign for change.
When you're talking about a crime that a perpetrator of sexual violence has deliberately, in a calculated, premeditated way, committed against a vulnerable victim versus a life sentence of trauma that a survivor has not chosen for themselves, it shouldn't be a question of what needs to happen.
For too long, those people who have perpetrated these horrific crimes have been able to hide behind a shield.
In 2018, the then Financial Services Minister Kelly O'Dwyer promised to introduce new legislation to allow victims of crime access to their perpetrators' superannuation.
My plan would be to introduce the legislation before the end of the year so that we can see these changes in the Parliament as soon as possible. Thanks for your patience too. Thanks for waiting.
It was all ready to go in 2018 and the Liberal government shelved it, and the benefits are pretty self-explanatory. I mean, it would mean that the liability is taken off the taxpayer and put back on the actual criminal.
Labor didn't pledge any public commitment to back the previous government's proposed bill. In a statement, the Assistant Treasurer Stephen Jones told 7:30 the Albanese government would welcome a discussion on how governments can best support survivors. Opponents of the change have previously raised concerns that the families of prisoners could be unfairly impacted, or that perpetrators could wind up welfare dependent once released from prison.
Wouldn't you rather put a paedophile on welfare versus a survivor whose fault it isn't?
This is a no-brainer change that is going to benefit people, it will save the taxpayer money, and it will punish offenders and hopefully act as a future deterrent.
Good boys. Hey, come on.
Melissa Snelling says the money she was awarded in compensation for the abuse she suffered will only stretch so far. It's allowed her to buy basic things like a car and paid for her legal fees.
I don't have superannuation. I didn't get the chance to build a career or a life. He's had one. Why should he get one when he comes out of jail in 4 years? It's not right.
Hi, I'm Lee Sales. Thanks for watching this story. If you'd like to watch more of 730's stories, they are on the left of your screen. And tap on the button below to subscribe and get the latest from ABC News.